What we find is that the group that public relations can most affect is the social connector. These are people who operate particularly on the horizontal axis. They actually have high trust in business compared to other groups. And a big trust builder for them is social responsibility. In fact, the media that they look to is conversation, as well as some of the traditional media, such as business magazines. They trust their own peers. They also trust their own CEOs and fellow employees. Now, what happens when you don't trust a company? Well, you don't buy its products, you criticize it to people, and you don't invest in it. So just a few thoughts to take away. We think that you've got to build trust both locally and globally, that in fact great companies that are trusted will be great, green, and good to employees, and that in fact trust is a highly personal activity, that you have to, again, engage on both axes, the horizontal and the vertical, that a person like me continues to be the most trusted source above CEOs, above doctors, but you also need those with credentials to reinforce. So, a financial analyst or an MD, and trust holders have their own behaviors. Stuart, on to the nation of cynics.
Okay, thank you, Richard. So, are we a nation of cynics? It's interesting, if you look at the trust survey, we're actually looking at a particular audience. And the audience are people like you and I. People who are interested in the media, people who are interested in politics, people who are interested in all sorts of things. But we live life in colour, as Richard would always plead for us to do within Edelman. And that means that we are different from the general consumer and we're different from financial analysts. Our view of companies is far more fluid. It is far more volatile. If you look at the data for a company like Nike, all through their troubles, financial analysts had a very clear view of Nike and it really didn't wobble too much. Even consumers actually had a very clear view of Nike and their trust in Nike didn't drop too much, but it did dip a little bit. But the real volatility was in the trust of the people like us, the people who are informed and the people that like to watch the media and comment on politics. So with that in mind, I don't necessarily think we are a nation of cynics, but maybe we and people like us in this room are more cynical. At least we're more fluid in our opinions. This is the drop that Richard was talking about, and the main finding there, I don't know whether Ian will comment on it later, is the media coming in at an all-time low of 16%. Oops, sorry about that. I've just gone backwards. So quickly go through Richard's presentation again, in case you didn't see it the first time. How many slides did you have? Right. Here we go. So, I don't think it's any surprise to any of us at the moment that government in general is probably suffering a particularly low level of trust. I mean, in the slack tie that we currently are between leaders of the Labour Party. What surprises me, I think personally, maybe professionally as well, is the trust in religious institutions. And Nims and I were talking earlier about what this really means. Is this about a disconnect? Does this mean that we're not religious, or does it mean that we're not connected to our religious institutions? And I think Nims is going to talk a little bit more about that when we come to the panel session. One of the theses that we've had before in this, that comes from the survey, is that there are three things that companies need to remember. One is their country of origin really does make a difference to how you're viewed in the outside world in other countries, and your sector is equally important. Here, technology, as Richard said, still ranks very highly, but in the UK, technology, healthcare, entertainment and retail are industries that you would want to be in from a PR point of view, and media, insurance and energy are ones which you would not wish to be in. The brand evaluator, I think the big difference here for the UK is that Amnesty International, Greenpeace, in our top 10 rankings, and you have got all this information, it'll actually be on a hot link coming to you after this meeting. Greenpeace and Amnesty International are in there amongst a whole bunch of international companies, and that really does say something for the power of NGOs in this particular market. So who do we trust? Well, Russian companies are least trusted, which may sort of account for the fact that there's a lot of Russian companies trying to build their reputations in the UK market at the moment. And Sweden, Canada and the Netherlands are companies that we place most of our trust in. The United States coming in there fairly low as always. Religious institutions, I've already commented about the UK level. What surprises me, and I'm not qualified to comment, but the factor of 2 between Netherlands, Brussels and the US and the UK is really quite a large margin. And I think this insight is going to be very interesting for people going forward, but what I'll be interested in are the trends as well. If we are about trying to deliver credible messages to our audiences, then there are 2 or 3 important factors. One is, if we are to deliver credible messages, we really must make sure that the media we use to communicate those are actually credible in themselves. And the top 3 are the ones that you would expect. Business magazines, analysts, news and radio. Weblogs coming up a little bit on last year, but at the bottom, corporate advertising as always. And if we are to deliver credible messages, then equally we must use credible messengers. And this trend that we spotted 2 years ago, the explosion in people's trust in a person like themselves, still holding very, very strongly at 42%, below the most credible spokespeople, specialists and industry analysts. And this UK CEO position, the UK loss of faith is in actually all messengers, not just the CEO, except the regular employee of a company. And we'll come back and talk about that in a minute. We wanted this year to unpack a person like me. You know, we said to people, do you trust a person like yourself? And they said yes for 2 years. So the question in this year, what does this person actually look like? So there are 2 factors. One is, a person like me, as defined by people like us, is someone who shares my interests and someone who possibly looks like me. But most importantly, it's someone who shares my interests. It's someone who has common interests, someone who's in the same profession, someone close to you within your local community. And 40% of people feel that shared political beliefs are very important to defining this sense of community, of trust. The localization message is incredibly important. We talk a lot in PR about global versus local, and this chart really gives people, I think probably for the first time, a sense of what that really means country by country. So for those countries at the very, very top, Sweden, Canada, UK, Italy, for us, this is for the UK, these organisations, these countries really have to make sure that they define a local presence in the local country. So you have to be British in the UK. You have to be as Canadian as possible in Canada. At the bottom of the chart for global organisations, these are the countries where you can afford to project a more global and a slightly less local image. China, Japan, Korea, Poland and India. Richard's already talked about the positive impact on society that, that businesses seem to have. In Europe, that's true except in Germany and in the UK, possibly backing up the fact that we are a nation of cynics. The role of CSR, much, much stronger this year. I think Richard and I were talking about the fact that in the US, people are really starting to see things from a stakeholder point of view rather than just a shareholder point of view. I think we in the UK, we in Europe, have understood that we live in a stakeholder society, not just a shareholder society, for many years. I think this year more than ever, this has come through in the results. And these are the kind of factors which really need to take into account when looking at building trust. Ensuring quality of products. This is the most important thing. People trust organisations not just because of their behaviours, but also because of the products that they produce. We know that just as consumers ourselves. What do we do if we trust companies, those that we view as socially responsible? We purchase their products and services and we recommend them to others. But we also punish them. Now, we know that people over-index in these sorts of questions, but we do punish them, and we're seeing increasing evidence that people really are taking their personal views into the marketplace with them. Global issues that the UK wants to address. I don't think anyone will find it surprising that global warming has risen up the ranks in the last 12 months. But the top 3 by a large order of magnitude, global warming, poverty alleviation, and human rights.